people are becoming so openly racist, okay? Not only that, the emergence of right-wing racist groups and student organizations, and I say on the flip side, where are the minority, the organizations of color? Where is Mecha? Damn it! Where are the black students groups? Where are the other progressives? Because we had back then a very radical white group called Students for a Democratic Society. Where is SDS nowadays? We are not even responding to this this crisis, because we have now become sort of normalized to accepting that. I think it's ironic that we have high school students today because really my message is more towards them, towards this new generation. And you know, as I go through the PowerPoint, I want to have a lot of dialogue, a lot of interaction, because we also have in the house some very important, very iconic figures, I would say, that I want to just mention and sort of introduce briefly right now. We have David Sanchez. Dr. David Sanchez is the founder of the Brown Berets. And 50 years ago, he was very much a part of the high school walkouts, as well as an academic throughout the last 50 years. And finally, I want to mention also a very dear friend and a person that I just met today that is also a historical, iconic figure, the daughter of Eliezer Risco, who was the founder of La Raza newspaper, and also was part of the East LA 13 that were arrested for the conspiracy to organize the East LA High School walkouts. Of course, they were all exonerated under appeal. And Eliezer Risco moved from running the La Raza newspaper to Fresno State and became the founding chair of the La Raza Studies Department in 1969 as well. But I want to thank in particular Cruz Herrera, Cruzito, who has brought Tonatzin Risco with him today, because Cruzito is already organizing next April the 50th anniversary conference of El Plan de Santa Barbara conference that took place at UC Santa Barbara. So this is connecting a lot of efforts, and I look forward to talking a little bit more and for them to give feedback if you have any questions. We're celebrating today not only this series, but also what I wanted to share with you in the context of my talk is not only the celebration about the 50th anniversary of the walkouts, but also the historical impact that the Educational Opportunities Program made. And the founding of EOP was here at Cal State Long Beach in 1967 by Dr. Joseph L. White. If it had not been for Dr. Joe White, who recruited me out of East LA, said, look, I can admit you right now, I'll get you financial aid, you can move into the dorms, and you can start next week. That's how I ended up at Cal State Long Beach in January of 1968. So for me, it's thank you. We are probably not only a much larger population, but we have now a much greater representation in every aspect of life, certainly in the enrollment of Mexican Americans, Chicanos, Latinos today. But in my opinion, we see less involvement, less activism, and frankly, we are too addicted to this right here, right? So there's David. You recognize him. He's still, ya ves, dicen que todavía está guapo. Let me tell you, this is a collection of 25 to 30,000 photographs, mostly black and white, that are the decade of existence of La Raza, beginning in 1967 through 1977 when the newspaper disappears. But it's a very, very deep collection of photographs of all of these events and locations. This is at the LA, I believe it's at the LA Unified School Board. And this is one of the photographs that is historical because this happens right after the walkouts. And remember, this was an event that was going on for probably about 3 weeks. So Bobby Kennedy comes into town, and the leaders of the walkouts meet him at the airport. In the tarmac, I believe this photograph was taken. And you see young people. This is a very graphic illustration of the confrontation between the East LA sheriffs against the students blocking the streets. And this one, which is an actual arrest of Ruth Robinson, who's on the right, was one of the photographers of La Raza. And there's work that she produced, that she archived with the La Raza that you can view at the Autry Museum. Of course, this is Freddy Resendez, one of the youngsters that just came out of the rank and file of students and became a very powerful spokesman. And there's many, many others like Paulo Crisostomo, John Ortiz, Coqui Rodriguez, and a number of others that were definitely part of this student leadership. So what I hope that we can do today is not only celebrate and recognize the leadership of Sal Castro, who was the teacher that not led, he was the collaborator with the students that began months prior to this social movement that was for the first time creating the expression as well as energizing the community around the issue of educational reform. The Walkouts is such a broad topic, but the accomplishment of the Walkouts was not only educational reform, but also how it opened the doors of opportunity for Mexican American students to go to college, because we had none attending public colleges and universities, let alone private universities, up until that point. So then comes along a black guy named White. Dr. Joe White was the first African American professor on this campus. He was tenured in psychology. EOP today is in every Cal State, in 110 or 112 community colleges, and every UC, and of course in many other private universities, not only California, in many other states. EOP is national. Definitely. Joe White, you're in the house. After the Walkouts in the spring of '68, there was hundreds of Mexican American students that flooded the universities. We went from having less than 100 blacks and Chicanos when I started in January 1968. By the fall, we had at least 600 blacks and about the same amount of Chicanos, all coming through the EOP program. Many washed out. But let me tell you, that was the beginning of the opening of the doors of opportunity for Mexican Americans. And we didn't have the Central American migration that comes about in the 80s and the 90s. We did not have the diversity of communities that are now all over the United States. So once we came into the campus, and in '68 and '69, there was this national movement to create black studies. It was predominantly black studies. And we were riding the coattails of the black civil rights movement, of the conservative MLK, because he was considered conservative, and the radical. Stokely Carmichael, Malcolm X, Solonize, Edrich Cleaver. And so these were all the different influences that were happening. So we happened to create this movement to create educational reform in March of 1968. But a month later, April 4th, Martin Luther King is assassinated. 2 months later, Bobby Kennedy is assassinated. And we have uprisings throughout the United States. And there are shootouts between Black Panthers and the Oakland police. And all of these confrontations and radical thinking coming from Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown. So it was a process, a very, very polarizing process, because we also were faced by the war in Vietnam. All of us were. And it wasn't only the young men your age that were concerned, like, oh hell, what am I going to do when they draft me? It was every woman, sister, mother, wife, daughter, of every one of those young men that had to face the same reality of possibly having to go to war. I really think that both of these gentlemen deserve that recognition, because when we use the expression many times very loosely that we stand in the shoulders of those that have come before us, I believe that this truly applies, because without those radicals or people willing to risk their lives, their careers, like in the case of Sal Castro and Joe White, we wouldn't be where we're at. So there's definitely a need for a change today. We have grown tremendously. That's why they're so scared of us. Okay? That's why there's this racism that comes to the surface. So when the walkouts come about, it's after decades of frustration. And these young people that are here with us today have met Sylvia Mendez. Jesus and his colleagues brought Sylvia Mendez. She is one of the children that were the plaintiffs in the Mendez versus Westminster School Board here in our beautiful Orange County, and that was won in 1946 by the Mendez family on behalf of their children, because they refused to send their children to Mexican schools. And the discrimination that happened when Mr. Mendez, Gonzalo Mendez, took two of his kids and one of his nephews. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jesus, but they said, el güerito sí se queda, this one can stay, but these two over here, they got to go to the Mexican school. And that essentially was what brought about the Mendez versus Board of Education decision in 1946 that was litigated by a guy named Thurgood Marshall. What a coincidence, huh? Thurgood Marshall goes on to also argue the case Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 that totally desegregated the public schools in the United States. Now, time out. Not immediately. We'll go back to what happened after that, but just to clarify, Thurgood Marshall became part of the U.S. Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court justice at that time in 1954 was the former California governor, Earl Warren. So there was an alignment of beliefs or philosophies, more progressive thinking, and it was about ending this discrimination in the public schools nationwide. But the foundation was the argument of the case that was made by Thurgood Marshall in Mendez versus Board of Education. There's other cases that preceded that. The Lemon Grove District case back in 1931. So this was happening for decades until in 1968 the explosion happens with the walkouts. But it's because also the conditions were leading up to this pressure to open up the colleges and the universities because of the civil rights movement. And what comes about, of course, is also the creation of this dynamic of political pressure, which, let's face it, the establishment was not ready for. Now they don't care. They know how to handle us, right? They call security. They know how to say no diplomatically. But that's what makes it even more challenging today, because the conditions are so openly racist or discriminatory, but they know how to keep in this case, the immigrants, the Mexicans, the Latinos in their place. The history of the Mexican civil rights movement is a 4-part series. The first segment is called A Quest for Homeland, that has to do with the loss of the Mexican territory and a number of things that were going on in the mid-60s. Chavez, Reyes Lopez Tijerina in New Mexico, fighting for returning the land grants to the rightful owners. Corky Gonzalez leading a nationalist movement in Denver, Colorado. And what happens tragically in 1970 here in Los Angeles, the National Chicano Moratorium that ends with the death of journalist Ruben Salazar at the hands of an East LA sheriff. So, I mean, it's just replete with information. The second segment is entirely on the farm workers movement. The third is, of course, taking back to schools. And the last one has to do with political empowerment. And believe me, this is really still the most comprehensive documentary on this Mexican-American civil rights movement that now evolves into a whole different period. And about a year later, in April of 1969, all of the different groups that emerged in the college campuses that were receiving, finally, Mexican-American students organized around different organizations. We had United Mexican-American Students on this campus and several other campuses, UCLA, Cal State LA, but there was all kinds of other groups up north, the Mexican-American Student Confederation in San Jose, and so forth. There was even a group at East LA College called La Vida Nueva. So at the 1969 El Plan de Santa Barbara conference, all of these groups convened and agreed to become a movement, a student movement, to have a statewide and a national-wide Mexican-American student movement known as Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. And Aztlán being this mythical land, this mythical place where the Aztecs came from to migrate into what is now Mexico City and to create their civilization. There had been just a month prior to that, in March of 1969, a conference in Denver that produced this concept of el plan espiritual de Aztlán, que era otro. It was another concept about our nationalistic, our historical, and the connection with our roots. So Mecha comes out of that, but also this blueprint that comes out of it is the guiding light for all of us to come back to our campuses to establish Chicano studies programs. And that's what we did here at Cal State Long Beach. By the fall of 1969, we started not only Chicano studies, we had all 4 ethnic studies departments started, and they had, at least in our case, we had 8 full-time faculty. With the creation of the departments, is the students that run the departments. The head of our UMass chapter here, now dearly departed, Francisco Sandoval, became, from president of UMass, became the department chair. The Black Student Union's president, Tony Wilkins, became the founding chair of the Black Studies Department on this campus. Who would have thunk it that the institution would give us 8 faculty positions in Chicano studies? All of you that are faculty here, you know how difficult it is to even get one position, okay? But that also created the path for the development of women's studies programs a few years later. And of course, we're still evolving in terms of these programs. If you look at the size of our population, over the last 40, 45 years, we multiplied more than 10 times, okay? just in the last 25 years, every year, the Latino population is growing by 1.5 million. And of course, if you look at this graphic, and these are still dated numbers, okay? We are probably closer to 40 million, this is all Mexican origin. We're closer to 60 million, and about 2/3 of that are Mexican origin. And that's the proportion you see throughout any statistics. So this is part of this hate, the reason for this hate, this anti-immigrants, anti-Mexican rhetoric coming out of Trump. But also what we have seen is a tremendous increase in the enrollment of Latinos in higher education. What we're looking at is as many as 3.3 million Latinos in higher education by 2019. We're currently at around 3 million, okay? But we're also looking at different forces, lack of access to financial assistance, a number of other barriers. But what is really important to note is that we have just skyrocketed in the number of Latino students in higher ed. Now, we're still suffering from a pyramid that is predominantly the largest number are in the community colleges. And then you have a mid-range that are in the 4 universities. Then you have a tiny little percentage in grad school. But this is a graphic that I wanted to highlight in particular, the relationship between men and women. Look at the size of the Latina student population is more than 500,000 greater than Latinos, than Latino males. And that's not a problem. The problem is that you young men need to go to college. And also that we have a problem as a community to make sure that we divert the law-writing, gang-banging, pelones that are out there wasting their lives. It's absolutely proven, and I don't have a study to quote you, but it's absolutely proven that male Latinos and male blacks are disappearing from colleges and universities. Right now, we're bumping up to almost 2-to-1, okay? About 65% of the enrollment today. Well, you see the numbers there, okay? So it's something that is going to continue to happen as long as we do not prepare Latino and African American males early enough. If you take a university like Cal State Long Beach that receives 105,000 applications for about 10,000 slots, okay? You're talking about 1 out of 10 is going to get admitted. And now we're cherry picking. Now we are selecting for the most qualified, the most, and we're not creating the path for some of those that are the 2.0 to 2.5 students, okay? There is a path to community college. So, bottom line, there's still a lot of work to be done. That's all I'm saying. But we have made tremendous gains. And I think that the other part, and you can see this in this graphic, is the promoting what is the posgrado, grad school. Look at the tiny amount in 1990, hasn't bumped up too much. And today, we're ranging from, I would say, not even 200,000, okay? Nationwide, in master's and doctoral degrees. So that's the real challenge to me that we need to get through. Look at the size of the Latina population. It's almost 2-to-1, right? So what I'm proposing is that there's challenges for all of us here to open the doors of opportunity wider, and also to push our students to go much higher than just the BA. There is legislation right now in the state of California to require that every Cal State graduate in the entire system has to have at least one ethnic studies class. And that would be a boom to the ethnic studies programs throughout the CSU. But there's also local initiatives that have been growing over the last 3-4 years. In particular, and I'll share with you a little bit about the program that I coordinate here with the Long Beach Unified, we started 3 years ago teaching on Saturdays a college credit ethnic studies classes in the high school. If ever we need ethnic studies in the high schools, it's now. When you see the region, California, Mexico, and this is why I have focused in that area, we're talking about the number 6 economy of the world, California, which is a nation state, and Mexico, which is the 13th economy of the world. But who's the majority in that region, right? Mexicans. We are still on the lower end of the economy because we still have essentially a cheap labor, we're perceived as a source of cheap labor. So when you combine the national enrollment of Mexicans in Mexican higher education with what we have approximately right now, you're looking still at an underrepresented proportion of the region. And why it's important in Mexico to teach about the history, the culture, the demographics, the contributions of what is 60% of the Latino population. Approximately 40 million Mexicans living this side of the border. But in Mexico, they're still not teaching, researching, and of course appreciating what is our reality as Mexicans abroad. And I think that we need to expand the way of looking at the region. It's not just NAFTA and renegotiating NAFTA, is how do we prepare the workforce for the future? And this was the same argument 25 years ago when NAFTA came about, that it did not include an educational component, an educational element such as Erasmus or all the different agreements that they have in Europe because of the European economic market. Well, if we have a North American regional economic market, then we need to have also an educational regional common market. El Rancho Unified begins its revolution in June of 2014 when they adopted their own board resolution to require that at least that all their graduates would have at least one ethnic studies class. I partnered up with them to create the first Saturday class after I taught a summer Chicano studies class at Carson High School in the summer of 2014. And that's where this idea came about, to offer a Saturday college academy on ethnic studies. Now we have a program that is expanded to 3 different districts. Long Beach Unified bought in with 12 ethnic studies classes every semester for 5 years. What the parents are concerned with, amigo, what the hell are you going to do with that degree? Okay? Or the bottom line that they themselves are not aware about their own history and culture. Even if they come with already, let's say, a BA or higher, they're not necessarily aware or exposed to the dynamic of a community of people of 60 million. Okay, we're larger than every other nation in the world that is Spanish speaking. Larger than Spain, larger than Colombia, which are the second highest number of Spanish speaking populations. We're not larger than Brazil, but they're Portuguese speaking. So it's that kind of dynamic. And also, they don't understand the value, the importance of the economic power that this population has. We are becoming larger. We're in size, larger than almost every other nation. But in terms of economic power, we're getting up there close to Mexico's economic cloud. So that's why looking at the region to me is very interesting, because when you begin to understand, so what's the future in terms of productivity of the region? We are one of the most important regions without any kind of agreement, economic agreement already. But it's not perceived that way fundamentally because neither side talks to one another. There's no policies being made between the California government with the Mexican government, or just between the Californias. In terms of the economies, Mexico is California's #1 business partner. it begs the question, why are we not creating more collaborations? The minimum wage in Mexico today just went up. 10% it went up. Can you believe that? From 80 pesos a day to 88 pesos a day. Now give me a break. No, wait a minute. How much is 88 pesos? No, exactly. It's about, round it off by 20. Round it off by 20. That is about $4.50, maybe $5 a day. Okay? So you will earn that in half an hour of work in California. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
The school that I go to, it's the majority is like Hispanic, but like when you go to like on campus, you don't really sense that. Like, is there a way that we can like increase the presence or like create like a feel that we are like a majority at our school?
So it's half Latinos and half Vietnamese, right? Get together with the Vietnamese. and come about with some justification for why you need to be taught about the history, the culture, and the contributions of both of these communities. And you can do what the Walkouts leaders did. You write a petition, you write them a letter, you request, and then they become demands, and when they send you to hell, then you're going to say, well, what do we do about it? Let's go back to our iPads or Go ahead. If you're already, in terms of grade point average or your own skills level, not well prepared in high school, then you're doing kind of remedial education to bring you up to good writing skills, good math, and then you select a particular field. Let's say you're going to computer science, and then now you can get a job with a 2-year degree. There isn't the motivation to go and become an engineer or to get into a 4-year university and then you find out about the social sciences and about humanities or discover that you have talent in the arts. I don't have the precise numbers, but I would say probably about 50% or more are of that, that phenomenal amount, that is still increasing every year. But they are getting stuck and not coming out of the community college because now they can earn a job. For a long time and even now, there's still a commitment to increase the resources for community colleges. And that's certainly where we still need even more, in my opinion. Now, the other school of thought is Trump's mentality, which is we need to create vocational schools. And what is community colleges anyway? It's like this idiotic idea that community colleges are worth or not doing what they're supposed to do because he comes from the school of Trump University. That's their mentality. Or we're going to make you rich, or we're going to have something that is turnkey ready for you to earn $15 an hour. And that's not where it's at. So my comment would be we need to invest more in making that transition, helping students to make the transition, and for the CSU also to be more accepting, more embracing of those students that are not necessarily the cream of the top, see? Because we don't have the access that I had with EOP. EOP is still in existence, but in the CSU system, it has been shrunk. Whereas EOP is very much available. They have even more resources in the community colleges. So again, it's the leadership of the state, the policy makers, but undoubtedly community colleges have got a tremendous amount of resources.
You and all of those who helped lead the walkouts, including my papa, Eliezer Risco, which will be also in one of those documents if you get on the YouTube and watch the video. But you answered one of many of the questions, the elementary K through 12 ethnic studies and the involvement of the parents with that as they're growing up will get them before they get to the universities at a junior college level or at a university. And as in the university, I think that we've lost, in this age that you guys are in high school and junior college, we've lost that basic feeling of the power and the strength of our people. And once we get back to honoring and respecting our people and the fact that only united will we ever succeed, You know, I remember marching the streets. I was very little. I remember still being in pigtails, but I remember luchando, power to the people. Hell no, we won't go. We won't go back to Mexico. You know, que viva la raza. And la raza unida will never be defeated because only united will we stand.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Muchas gracias, Professor Armando Vázquez. He is one of the representatives of El Plan de Santa Barbara, which he talked about. This book came out in Oakland in October of 1969, La Causa Publications. This was the discussion in 3-day conference in Santa Barbara where the movimiento met up and intellectualized our movimiento. With El Plan Espiritual de Aztlán out of Denver in March of 69, a month later in April, they met at UCSB. This one came out in January of 1970 because La Causa went to UCSB. In next year for April, the 3rd edition is going to come out to honor all the elders and our veteranos, our profesores that opened the doors so we can get an education. If we were mathematicians, what this formula would be is get your education, go to your community, and be of service to empower it. Whatever your stars is, one of you could be a professor to write a history on him. It needs to be done. You can be a doctor, a lawyer, you can be a social service worker. I got out and became a social service because of the empowerment of the community is important. I also went to law school. I also am an income tax preparer. I'm also a danzante azteca de nos cultura. That's what Chicano studies can get you, right? All of that in a bag of chips. And tu enchilada, and your apple pie. Pero, mucha razón, porque Southcasters, no se hagan tontos. Háganse inteligentes. Strive for it, because in 68, 67, 65, we couldn't be here doing this. Educating ourselves, empowering ourselves, feeling good about what we've done and what we need to do. Porque ustedes llevan ese cargo de nosotros, los jóvenes, como Juventino. He's a classmate. Over there in UCSB, I point him out because he went on a hunger strike with other colegas at UCSB to get PhD program in Chicano studies, to help La Lucha, to open the doors because of this. So, you know, tienen todo el futuro de ustedes, pero también échele ganas, porque it's not so easy for our communities, you know? Entonces, por el amor de Armando y todo el movimiento, I'm just going to do it one time.
So, Juventino Gutierrez, known as Tino, is one of the core teachers at El Rancho Unified, but he's a graduate from Cal State Long Beach. His family lives in Long Beach. He's got 3 or 4 kids in Long Beach Unified, but he's definitely a pioneer over at Rancho. So share with us what's going on.
Mucho gusto. My name is Juventino Gutierrez. I'm from Oxnard originally, Oxnard, California. I went to UC Santa Barbara, where Luisita's from, and I was a hunger striker there in '94. And then I was fortunate. I was in New York City in graduate school, which I never finished. And then I came back and I started working for Rancho High School. My wife's from Pico Rivera. You could only get in either if you're born in Pico Rivera or you jumped in through marriage. So I got jumped in through marriage. So my wife's from Pico. I was fortunate enough to be there at that moment when our board decided to pass over the summer the Ethnic Studies Initiative and to make our school district the very first district to mandate having to take one Ethnic Studies class at least in order to graduate. And so they came to us and they did something very unique there. They created a hybrid program where they allowed us as teachers to teach any class we ever wanted to teach. So we all wrote out our classes and they're A through G approved. And they also partnered, of course, with Armando and Long Beach. So we have a very unique model, and we've spoken about it throughout the country. What we're doing right now is we're expanding. Like Armando said, we're expanding it from K through 12. So right now we have a number of courses that we teach at the high school, well, both ourselves and through Cal State Long Beach through the Saturday program. And now we're going to start to expand it using the arts as a foundation. We have a lot of great artists, Jesus Magdaleno and a couple of the other art teachers, Guadalupe Carrasco. So they're going to start to incorporate the arts to start to move ethnic studies down the pipe, down there through middle school and then through elementary. We're continuing to expand our ethnic studies offerings. We're doing an ethnomathematics class We're looking at different ways of thinking about math with one of our teachers there. And that freedom that they've allowed for teachers to create their own classes, I think really is unique and creates a real dynamic program. And we've just been very grateful to have partnered up with Profe here. I got the honor of co-teaching a course, helping them out in the summer, because we had a very big class. So it's been a great relationship there. And some of my colleagues are at La Mirada in the after-school program, and it's a great program. So it's expanding. And what I was going to ask, if I had the opportunity, was making the continuity from El Movimiento in '68 on now, because that's the thing that we're trying to always connect together, so that it becomes one continuous movement. We tend to forget that when I was in Santa Barbara, it's one of the first things you do when you become you're a member of El Congreso, which just by name is basically a mention, but it's El Congreso, is they give you the history of El Congreso, and starting with El Plan, and then the infiltration of the FBI, and so we have a sense of continuity. And then there was the hunger strike right before us, right in '89, and then '94, and then there was one in UCLA. So this continuity is really important. I know we have a professor here named Dr. Alfredo Carlos, who's also a congresista as well. So creating that continuity so that our students see themselves as part of that movement, that's the important part. That's the part that we need to figure out, how to create the continuity, how to create that story, so that it's continuous, and that's I think one of the challenges for us. And ethnic studies is a great component to that. It's a great part that really helps us out. So,
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
Do you want me to stand up there?
You could. Yeah. Come on up here. Yes. We need you. We need you to stand up here.
Pretty young, right? But I want to know, because I always see things people getting involved in stuff, but I don't know in my community how I can get involved. I know a little bit about inside school, but I want to know outside the community with the whole city, and because a lot of people in my city are Hispanic as well, and it seems like a lot of them don't really have an interest in school and continuing their education, but I kind of want to change that,
Yeah.
So, do you have any suggestions as to what I can?
You just started. By expressing what you're saying, you are taking leadership. Now the question is how to do that. And that could be on a Saturday, it could be after school, and just bringing people together. And not only the guys, bring the young women as well to begin to reflect, what are the issues that are affecting you? How do we address that? I'm gonna point something out that somebody would immediately say in a college, oh, don't use the word Hispanic. Well, what I would say is, look, that's part of your growing process, to be able to understand what are all of these different identities that we have. I always banter with my students when I say, well, what do you prefer to be called? And define yourself, and in writing to explain why they prefer to call, whether it's Hispanic or Latino or Mexican American or Mexican or Chicano or wetback or chili choker or beaner or border hopper. So who's going to say any of those negative ones, right? They're going to say, well, and it's all a matter of definition. Now, we're having today a debate, an evolving new term. You've heard the term Latinx. And, we could spend the rest of the evening debating about Latinx. And no, we're not going to go there. All I'm trying to point out is that identity is evolving, because we were Mexican-Americans in the 60s. That's what we revolted against, because it was comparable to how Negroes rejected, and they said, that's too close to the N-word. And we're not Negroes, we're black and we're proud. And they began to express the sense of identity that they defined. So Chicanos adopted this term that even in our own homes, ¿qué quiere decir eso de chingao, Chicano? And it was a process of people understanding, because Chicano had a very negative meaning. It meant lesser than a Mexican. It meant that you were low class, that you were not a true Mexican, all kinds of, negative implications. In Mexico, they would laugh at us. Now, today, it's a hell of a lot more accepted, and also they see us. That's the definition of that population. And it's still changing, because now we have so many more Mexican born that have migrated, that it's hard to say, well, change to Chicano. No, you weren't born here. So there's never one single thing. See that whole process of defining your identity, that's a good beginning point.
I wrote a paper on terms related to La Raza.
La Raza is another one.
There's many terms, but you have to be called what people want to be called. Guatemaltecos, they want to be called Guatemaltecos, Salvadoreños, Salvadoreños. So whatever you want to be called, that's what you are. At the same time, I think you understand that the word Chicano is a unifying glue, which glued the people together and brought the people together. Since then, there's so many names, the glue is gone. And the glue is gone, we want to try to bring it back.
It's the same mentality as 50 years ago, when the student movements come about, and there were student movements in all campuses, literally throughout the United States, against the war, against many things that were happening in the U.S. But out of that emerges ethnic studies. And it was perceived to be this very radical, very hateful, and very anti-white message or content. That was the reason why in Arizona they killed the Mexican American Studies program. And it ended up going to court, then it was appealed, and Mexican American Studies has been reestablished. Just proposing, like this young man that asked, what do we do? I'm not there, I'm not going to say, why don't you teachers do this? But somebody can convene in the school or out of school something informal that talks about your question with your peers, but also with some guidance. I would be glad to come and talk with you guys, just kind of like reflect about what are some of the issues that but it's really up to you guys to create a class. I mean, you could ask for that is generic. I can provide you the reader that we're using for the college class. It could be what El Rancho has done. The teachers develop the classes. They have 16 classes. They have a mural class. They have a class on literature that each teacher has developed their own, because the school board said to them, look, think about the class that you always wanted to teach, but you never could have an opportunity to do it. Create it.
From what I gathered about your presentation, I realized that back in 1968, the movement that you guys were fighting for was more of an explicit issue because of all the inequality in the educational setting. And now, 50 years later, I feel that it's more of an implicit issue because many students are aware that they're being denied different opportunities as a result of their race, and many faculty are okay with that because of this idea of deficit thinking. And just noticing that, yes, the numbers have gone down as far as high school dropout rates for Latinos. So what do you think that we can do, and this kind of plays on to what everyone else is saying, as students to demonstrate that, yes, there has been an improvement in the right direction, but no, we're not there yet, and we still are not receiving the same quality of education and opportunities because of our ethnicities.
You hit it right there, man. Power.
She should be already.
She answered it.
Look at the number of Chicano Latino students that we have at Cal State Long Beach. Why isn't there more activism? Why isn't there more involvement? Not just Latinos, but I'm saying white students of conscience that should know better. We had in common in the 60s the Vietnam War. We were all, affected by the draft, by the killings. That was a common denominator. But there was also a lot of consciousness raising taking place to leave behind racism and discrimination and the civil rights movement that was finally bringing about the implementation of that 1954 a decision known as Brown versus Board of Education. You guys are all well connected because of the Mendez case. But it took that long for the implementation, and it still took years to radicalize the change of ending the discrimination. Now, what happens 50 years later? Its ugly head has come back up. We thought we were already over, that we had already passed that. Now it's in the open.
Should us as young Hispanic males be involved with politics, or are we just simply too young to understand?
No, I think that the example coming out of the Florida school, the high school students that have led this movement, it's a good example. Now you're never too young. If you're able to articulate and you're able to say, this is what I think. Then he got up here and said, look, I don't want to just stand here. Let me get up here and tell you what I think or what I'm asking. That's the kind of leadership that we need, but from Black kids and Chicano Latino kids and with the Asian Americans, because we're all digesting this madness differently, okay? But I think that in terms of expressing your point of view, it's not that you have to get a certain of age, like, a drinking limit or what's your minimum age. No, it's whenever you're able to articulate and to, take a leadership role.
Vine a aprender. Es muy importante que los que enseñamos aprendamos. Para poder enseñar se necesita aprender. Yo soy sociólogo histórico. And I teach at Cal State Bakersfield in the Central Valley, where Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta launched the movement in 1965 that's still being struggled over. Todavía nuestros trabajadores del campo están en condiciones de explotación extrema y ahora la migra está entrando a las granjas y deteniendo a la gente en las carreteras. Y la gente se está matando en la carretera para evadir. So we got the same kind of extreme conditions that we were facing back in the 60s, or even worse, like Professor says. I want to tell you, you asked a very important question. I think it was you. What can I do with Chicano studies? What can you do with it? You need to know the history of your people. Chicano studies is a way of saying our people's history. And it can be broadened to be our people, to be the whole continente americano. Our people in Mexico, our people in Central America, our people in the south, west of the United States, our people in Long Beach. It's elastic. Chicano studies is so that you can be rooted in the history of your people and its culture for one purpose. And I think it was mentioned by several people here. You need to know your history so that you can be in history, which is now. Now, history is happening right now. It's happening with the young high schoolers that are fed up with shootings. It's happening with women marching every year by the hundreds of cities. The women marches. It's happening since 2006 with millions of immigrants that decided to be their own voice finally as immigrants. Even if it's a supermarket, you can be in the history of that situation. If you have issues that you gotta deal with. So studying our people is a way to be in our people's moment and be part of the history we're making. That's the best, I think that's the best explanation of why you should be studying hard our people's history, so that you can then move it forward in our times. And your generation is full of vitality, and you have complete new technology and communication. This is just waiting to be activated. You guys are taking selfies in the bathrooms. You're taking pictures of the food that you're about to eat, and you're taking pictures of your girlfriends. You have no idea what this weapon is. This is more potent than anything our generation ever came up with to communicate. You can shut down hundreds of high schools. That's how the people that did the shooting movement, ¿cómo se llaman? The enough movement, or no more shooting movement. The high schoolers, they all did it using their new technology. You have it available. Use it. Use the new technology. And then the last thing I want to emphasize, when you go to college, because I am absolutely convinced you guys are going to go to college. I'm very appreciative of the maestro that brought you. Now you got to clone yourselves. You got to multiply yourselves like by 10 or by 100. So go back to your place. Clone yourselves. Go pull somebody else into this orbit. Now, last thought. When you go to college, as I'm sure you will, the way to do it, the trick, is do a double major. Because I once went to UCLA Chicano commencement, and I was really amazed at the Chicano commencement at UCLA. There was like 800 people going through the Chicano commencement ceremony. Say, ay, jole, Chicano studies really rocks here. And they all would come up to get their diploma, and they would always tell so-and-so, Jose Perez, who graduates in biology and Chicano studies. And then the next guy. Accounting and Chicano studies. And then the next guy. Electrical engineering and Chicano studies. You get your Chicano studies to be somebody in history. And you get your electrical engineering so you can contribute in a professional field and have a livelihood, living source. Entonces hagan las dos cosas, eh?
Gracias, Gonzalo.
I really want to go back to my the place I grew up now. Even though I live in Westminster now, where everything seems a lot calmer, I want to go back to my roots, go back to where I came from, because I know a lot of people there struggled, and a lot of the people there, of like the people that lived around me, they have kids at age 15, they're in gangs, and really the change starts within someone else. It's the responsibility of one another to really take a stand and make the world a better place. And one of the steps I want to do is maybe in like 10 years or something, when I'm in college, not even college, when I graduate, or maybe even earlier, I want to start a group where, or like an organization or something around that line, where we go into the communities that have really who have low poverty rates, or are more prone to like bad influences. And then if we get enough people to do that, then we can change lives one through another. Maybe one person decides, oh, the gang life isn't for me, or maybe just doing bad in school isn't for me. And I really want to do that, because I don't know, this is my culture, and I really want it to prosper in the future and not just leave it where it is. With I forgot the numbers you said of Chicanos that go to college, but I want that to double or even triple. And remember the name, it's Lupe Perez. And
well, thank you.
Yes.
And you just started the organization that you're thinking about, because you're expressing it. And you don't have to wait until you're out of college. I mean, 10 years is too long.
Yeah.
Let's start tomorrow. Yeah, you started it right now.